Looks like we're just about 7 o'clock here, so I'd like to open this meeting of the Meredith Planning Board for Tuesday, September 23rd. I should start off with the introductions. Assuming I remember everybody's name, we have Peter Brothers on the far left. Good evening, Selectmen's representative. Next to is Liz Lapham. And next to her is Roger Sorrell, the Vice Chairman. And on my immediate right, I have Ann Butler. And then Richard Gherkin, and Ed Toohey. And the town planner is Angela LeBrecq. And then we have Mary Lee Harvey, town clerk. Let's start out with application submissions. And what we have here is Lakes Region Visiting Nurses Association proposed site plan amendment to finish off existing storage and basement space to facilitate expansion of existing surfaces. Tax map S25, lot 50, located at 186 Waukee Street in the Business and Industry District.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The site plan amendment is for the purpose of expanding the visiting nurses' office use into a portion of the basement and having additional parking on the adjacent lot. The application checklist and abutters list are on file. The fee has been paid, and it's recommended the application be accepted as complete for a public hearing this evening.
Okay. Are there any questions? Or?
Mr. Chairman, if this is accepted for hearing tonight, I would ask that I step down as I'm on the board of directors.
Okay. So, do I have a motion for acceptance? And do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. This will be scheduled for a public hearing later on. Next, we go to the public hearings. And we start out with Bayside Realty LLC. And this is a continuation of a public hearing held on August 26th of this year for a proposed site plan amendment to construct a 24 by 36-foot addition to an existing building and reconstruction of parking lot. Tax map S23, lot 92, located at 208 Daniel Webster Highway in the Central Business District. The application was accepted August 26, 2014. And along with that, we have architectural design review for Bayside Realty LLC, which is located at 208 Daniel Webster Highway. And it looks like we have somebody representing.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Carl Johnson from Advanced Land Surveying here in Meredith, and I am representing Bayside Realty LLC for this proposed site plan amendment and associated architectural design review for their real estate business currently located on Cataldo Road, and I'm sure you're pretty familiar with this building. And I did a very, what I thought, detailed explanation of the proposal last time, so I'll give a much briefer presentation this time. You have had the benefit of a site walk, and we're able to take a look at this and take a look at a couple of the issues that are existing there that we're trying to improve. The focus of the meeting is to primarily get approval for phase one this evening, which is the improvements to the front parking lot and, of course, the expansion of the building as shown on the site plan. Additionally, we would like to get approval for phase two, but phase two does require us to get additional approvals. We need to get a special exception from the Zoning Board of Adjustment for creating this area, which is within 50 feet of a non-designated wetland. So hopefully we can work through the details of that such that we're able to pull a building permit to get construction started on phase 1. And depending on the timing of the zoning board approval and how that comes through and the review of the Conservation Commission and so forth, phase 2 may be a spring project depending on just how the weather goes. But we would like at this point to get approval for both so that we did not have to come back to the board necessarily for site plan approval, although in Angela's recommendation she does have an additional review suggested, which would be a pre-construction consultation on site. We'll get to that in a minute. So the proposal as shown is to expand the existing Bayside Realty office with a 24 by 34 foot addition. It's set up essentially the same as the building that's there now, where there's 2 stories on the front side of the building and 3 on the back. And then, because the way the parking was originally constructed on this site, we want to do some improvements to make the traffic flow a little better, and also to have a little bit more room for the cars that are pulling in and out of parking spaces. We did do a little bit extra work in consultation with Randy Shuey, the soil scientist and sediment and erosion control specialist who worked on this project with us. And you can see we've made some additions primarily to the lower parking lot situation to deal with some of the issues that arose regarding the stormwater management. So that's what I'll focus on primarily in this presentation, because this is somewhat a little bit new. The parking layout is essentially the same, and I'll go over some of the elements that we added to help deal with some of the surface water issues. If you'll notice by the contours, it's gently sloping as you go down around the building, and you probably noticed on the sidewalk. As you go down into this lower parking area, which is a little bit differently configured than the parking area that was actually approved on one of the site plans that was approved by the planning board, to try to work a little bit more efficiently with the traffic coming in and out. And there is a need for one of the Bayside Realty Services vehicles to come down into this area and help with some of the storage issues. The concern that was raised primarily dealt with the proximity of this parking area with the non-designated wetland, which was delineated by Randy Shuey. And in talking to Randy, he basically pointed out that this wetland that's on this property is a result of the roadside drainage. It's a result of the drainage that comes through the culvert, which you can see has been added to the plan, which comes across Cataldo Road from the Mayhew property and enters into the ditch. And you can see by the topography that the ditch is a fairly narrow ditch, and it runs down along the easterly sideline of the property into what is really now a lawn area. You can see by the wetlands flags if you went out on the sidewalk. There's some additional drainage that actually comes off of the sideline on Route 3, and you can see by the contours that it's gently sloping from the highway down into this area. And the water kind of sits here and then slowly seeps onto the state of New Hampshire property. And then it continues down, and the wetland was actually delineated all the way down to the main culvert, and the main culvert goes underneath Route 104 and continues to the north. So this portion, this upper end of this wetland, is entirely a result of drainage, and it's very well suited to deal with the drainage because of the fact it's fairly level. There's not any danger of any erosion issues here because of the general flatness of that area. And it does very well to deal with the drainage that comes off of the highway. Most of the drainage that's coming down from Route 3 onto this site is fairly clean. It's a lawn area. It's mowed by the state, maintained by the state. Not a lot of erosion entering there. The same with the drainage that comes across the highway, except for torrential rain situations. It's fairly clean drainage going down through there and entering into this lawn area, going just south of the sign and entering into the wetland. The area that we're proposing is just a little bit over 2,000 square feet there to add towards that wetland, and that's really a fairly small area the peak flow calculations would be almost negligible in terms of the water leaving the site. Nonetheless, we wanted to ensure that the water had some type of stabilization and treatment prior to getting into this wetland. So what we've come up with is the installation of what they call a Cape Cod curb. This is a curbing design that the town of Meredith uses a lot in their roadways. Most recently, it was used on Old Hubbard Road, the improvements that they just did last month. And it's a method that uses asphalt instead of granite to fold it over curb, and it's specifically designed to direct drainage in a direction that's desired. So the water that would be coming down this slope would be caught by this Cape Cod curb and sent down towards the north end of the parking lot and then into a very small, approximately 5-foot wide treatment swale, probably with a little bit of stone in there. And the grading of the parking area itself would start at the building approximately 9 inches below the finished floor of the building, and then would slope downward and towards that corner of the driveway, and also a little bit directly to the east, entering this treatment swale, and that would provide sufficient treatment of that water prior to being discharged into the wetland, which ultimately is where the water goes now. And it would just help in the treatment of any peak flow issues that might arise. So that's a very rudimentary and very simple solution to the issue of dealing with the drainage. That, of course, would have to be reviewed by the Conservation Commission. Your comments would be forwarded to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. The Zoning Board of Adjustment would look at that surface water issue before they would issue a special exception. So that's an additional guarantee that the board has, that it will be reviewed by 2 additional agencies in the town prior to getting approval. In terms of the rest of the development, it's pretty much as we said. We'd like to expand the parking a little bit to the west, still leaving a very significant buffer between the edge of the parking and the existing residential property to the west. I think in the site visit you can see we put some stakes out where the parking would be extended to, and that still leaves a very significant natural woodland buffer. Additionally, the portion of the parking that's nearest the house up by the road is essentially unchanged. It's relatively the same within a couple of feet of where the parking is now, and then it tapers slightly as you get away. By the time you get to a point where you're 10 or 12 feet away from the existing pavement to the proposed pavement, you're significantly past where the house is. So any of those parking issues down there and the lighting issues that came up at the last minute would be negligible because you're beyond where the house is. The abutter's house is more or less up towards the road. As mentioned in the staff review, this is a permitted use. There's nothing changed on this property. As a matter of fact, this property, when it was vacant, the proposal that came into this property was from Old Mill Realty. And I believe it's been a real estate office since that time. The maximum lot coverage allowed in the Central Business District is 65%, with a proposed lot coverage of 52%, and that's including both phases of the project. So we're still falling well below the maximum allowed in the district. As noted before, we would be required to receive a special exception for the parking in the 50-foot wetland setback. There is still a question that I'm trying to resolve with the code enforcement offices, whether or not the slight movement of the parking in the front actually requires going back to the zoning board. And so that is something that if you were to entertain an approval, if you could just note that a special exception may be required for parking in the setback, and if it is, of course, we'd have to get it, and that special exception would have to be added to the plan. Angela has a recommendation here that the edge of the wetland should be marked in the field prior to constructing the second phase in the lower parking area to ensure construction activities remain outside of the wetland. And that's something that we would recommend also. We do need permits from the Water and Sewer Department. They would review this as they do all site plans with regard to connecting to the municipal utilities, but there is existing water and sewer on the site. A recommendation that the green area space to the west of the building addition remain clear as to maintain a sight distance between the vehicles, and that's this area right here. Angela is saying that there shouldn't be any obstructions or any type of landscaping in that area that would block the view coming around, because it is a little bit tight, but it's a very short distance, and some car that was at the top can see right down to the bottom. They can tell if a car is coming up the other way. And that will be probably signed as employee parking only anyways, so it'll be a very short curve as a learning behavior to get in and out of that parking. The 21 spaces required and 17 are proposed in phase 1, so we would require in your approval that we waive 4 spaces, and then there will be 25 parking spaces after the completion of phase 2, so the waiver would essentially just disappear because we'd be in compliance with the requirements. We also need a dimensional parking waiver because the site plan was developed back in the day, and back in the day a parking space in Meredith was 9 by 18. With inflation, it is now 10 by 20. And so with many of these sites, as the recently approved site plan for Mr. Allen down on Route 3, when there's 25 spaces or less, it's very common to have the 9 by 18 parking spaces. We are required to have a handicap parking space. There was a suggestion at the meeting that we also provide a additional handicap parking space for employee, and we took a look at that. The way the situation is right now is that there is room, should it become necessary to do that we could add on the front left-hand parking space. There's sufficient room to expand that, and we would like the board to consider that to be an option only if it should become necessary to do so, because right now we want to make sure that we have as many parking spaces available that are for employees and also for visitors to the site. And so if there was a situation where we had one dedicated handicap for an employee and there wasn't an employee, for all practical purposes, you're kind of taking a parking space away. So if that could be accommodated, that would be appreciated. Angela's comments were with the benefit of some of the stormwater management elements that we added to the plan. So I'll just kind of go past that and reiterate those comments that I made at the beginning of the presentation regarding our attempt to deal with the stormwater management issues. The culvert has been added to the plan, and although the contours significantly noted the ditch, I did put some drainage symbols in there. You can see those little blue arrows. That's the direction of the flow. Contours point upstream. Don't forget that if you're ever lost on Mount Washington and you have a USGS map. We can add some temporary erosion controls to the plan, and what Angela's talking about is during construction there probably should be some hay bales and maybe a silt fence constructed to make sure that we don't cause any issues, because this will be a situation where we'll be taking some material out before we add material back in, and that's something that we can certainly do. All the lights on this site will be cut-off fixtures, similar to the fixtures that are there now, and there actually won't be too many lights added to the building anyways. And given the general area that it's in, with the street lights and McDonald's and so forth, and the Mayhew lot has elevated street lights, it will probably be an insignificant addition to the glow in that area. The sign is already there. There's no proposed changes to the sign. It's about 5 square feet larger than what the regulations say, but that's been there a significant amount of time. We have slightly relocated the dumpster to make sure that it's screened from public view. We also moved the propane tank. Had some discussion with Angela about the fine print of propane tank setbacks, but to avoid any confusion, we just moved it so it's more than 25 feet from the building, which is the maximum setback. of any code that you look at. So that can be reviewed by the fire chief, but we did relocate it to the other side of the parking area. I believe I answered most of the abutters' concerns that were raised at the last meeting. The business use is not changing. As a matter of fact, there's no intention to increase the amount of use of this. It's essentially to more efficiently manage and use the space that's there with the employees that are there. So most of those issues have been addressed. The amount of snow that's pushed up against the abutter's driveway is not an issue. They're about 30 feet from the abutter's driveway, even with the expansion. So just a little bit of a confusion as to where the line was probably resulted in some of those comments. We will add a note in that area that the vegetation between the shared lot line and the new parking area will be retained to the greatest extent possible. And we understand that the planning board does have the right to review and amend any approval that they should entertain. In terms of the architectural design, it's going to be essentially the same building style that's there. It's not a very complicated architectural application. You can see the architectural plans shown here, the front, the rear, and the side. Those are also in the packet. And so if there are any questions specific to that, either I will answer them or both Chris and Rob are here to address any specific questions about the architecture that I can't answer. That's pretty much the presentation. I'd be happy to entertain any questions that the board may have.
Any questions from members of the board?
Go ahead, Liz.
I'm just curious, how many employees do you have?
There's a difference actually between employees and associates.
This is Chris Kelly. He would like to come to the podium and address your question.
Thank you. Employees, within the two different companies, we have a total of 7 that presently work within the office. We have an additional 15 sales associates that work within the office. And then there's Rob and I.
The nature of the real estate business is such that there are not all of the employees at the site at one time. It's a very changed industry, and maybe Rob and Chris could give us an estimate of, on average day, how many employees would be on the site.
We'd like them all to be there every day, but that just doesn't happen. I would say if half of our sales associates were there at the same time, we're doing pretty good. Most of the time they're out on the road and trying to sell real estate, so. Usually once a week we have an office meeting where that's when we probably fill the parking lot. But that's only every other week actually, because we share that with our Laconia office.
So the idea when your sales associates are there, then they would, because because not everyone's going to fit in this proposed back one. The employee lot.
Right.
They would.
That probably the back one would be more for the staff, people that are there all day
All day long.
And the upper parking lot would be for the associates that would come and go.
The learned parking behavior is for the employees and the associates to park on that left-hand side and leave the spaces in the front of the building available for clients that may come in and out. Second bay would be to fill up the ones that are along the road, and then lastly, leave the ones that are in front of the building. That's kind of how I've experienced over the years going in there.
Mr. Chairman? Ann, go first, then.
I appreciate your consideration of the second handicap parking place, as we discussed before. I think, having observed around town, especially in the summer when real estate is particularly busy, it might be good to consider having it put in with the site plan so that there are 2 not necessarily back in the employee lot, so either employee or customer or client could access it. I feel it's important as the population begins to age, and as the state has an aging population anyway, that it's a serious consideration. So if you consider putting 2 handicap in, because you have the space, that would be.
Yeah, the space that I noted is most well suited for that, so that's probably, if the board chose to go that way, that's where the space would go.
Well, I only see one on the plan.
Right, but what I say, that's because of the discussion that we had about not wanting to put 2 unless the board voted that way.
Where would you put the second one then, if it's
If-
not in the back,
Right, if the vote moves the second one would be here.
on the other end? Okay.
Right. And if you see just to the left of that, it's kind of open,
Yes. so
and
they
that
have
leaves, that
access.
leaves it available for putting those extra width for the door opening and so forth.
Right, thank you.
Richard?
Carl, just to clarify for my edification here, on the size of the parking stalls, 2 things. One is that the proposal for requesting a waiver is because you're going to construct them at the old standard of 18 by 9 instead of the new standard.
The ones that are there, well, it's not striped now.
That's right now. That's part of the issue of confusion.
Yeah, there's an existing site plan.
Sorry, that's lithograph.
X-ray vision.
First of all,
This is why we don't do prints anymore in the office.
Nice paper.
Yes, if you could see that. I'll just say there's an existing site plan, and that site plan shows 9 by 18 spaces, so that's how it was laid out. So when you take that and you add those gray spots that I've added, it's 9 by 18. So we're just adding, we're keeping it 9 by 18, and then the ones we add in the back are going to be 9 by 18.
and you're going to stripe it.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a quick comment about parking. 9 by 18 parking can work, especially when you don't have 2 parking spaces abutting each other with bumper to bumper, do you know what I mean? That's when you kind of need that extra length. But here, when you have an 18-foot-long space, you can have like a 2-foot hangover from your bumper because it's just green area or lawn or whatever in front of you. But when you have 2 parking stalls, butting ends or butting heads, then you really need the extra length. So I think in this circumstance, it would probably work.
The other thing to remember about this site, which is more accommodating to 9 by 18, it's not like a fast food restaurant or something, you have people coming in and out all day, in and out all day. It's much less of a traffic trips per day, and so it makes it much easier. Probably a bad example because of some of the tubing radiuses that are right up at the front of the store, but all of the Old Province parking lot, that entire parking lot is 9 by 18 spaces. And so once you're not in that area, we're making that first turn going in, which was a design flaw. Those are all 9 by 18 spaces.
So is a lot of Hannaford.
Right, Block Hannaford is also. And a large vehicle, such as the one that Angela drives, is only about 5.5 feet wide and about 17.5 feet long. Not including the mirrors.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, just I guess a question for my edification in terms of the parking. The proposed addition adds, what, 3 more parking spaces, is it required? Is it by physical square footage? So my question is, if they're looking at phase 1 and presuming that phase 2 can be realized, it's got to go through ZBA and conservation as well. Have either one of those groups looked at this, or has there been any preliminary discussion?
Not until it's applied for, no.
Okay. Well, I guess,
Unfortunately, the reason for that, Peter, is that the zoning ordinance stipulates that any application before the zoning board that requires site plan review, does require the conditional approval of, it's not actually worded that way.
I think
Maybe
that's
Jack
for
can help
you.
me.
I think that's for use.
Okay,
Where you need a special exception for a use, you have to get written approval from the planning board.
written approval from the planning board,
Before
right?
going to the ZBA. But that's for like a use, like office.
But the process will be, if you were to entertain a conditional approval tonight, we would immediately apply to the zoning board of adjustment. But we have to go to the Conservation Commission first. They have to review it. They have 30 days to review it. Normally, they don't take that long. And then we would be on the schedule for the zoning board for a special exception. And with the 30-day appeal period after that, that's why I'm saying it would be probably a spring project for phase 2.
But, Mr. Chairman, but if I understand it correctly, you're going to be looking for a building permit based on our action on a conditional approval for phase.
Right, that's why Angela says we need the parking waiver.
My question is, if phase 2, for some reason, there is an issue with either the conservation or the zoning board, are we influencing them by giving a conditional with the limited, I mean, you really need those second sets of phase 2, the parking spaces, to make this thing work.
I wouldn't say so. It's not dependent on it. That's why it's a phased project. It would make it better. We're asking for a waiver of 4 spaces, which covers the non-granting of the special exception.
Okay, I guess that's the piece I just was...
Yeah, because once we get to the 20, if we would get the special exception, we get to 25, we don't need a waiver. So the waiver of the 4 is to cover the event that we don't get the approval for phase 2.
Now, is it 25 or 24? You said 25.
If you look at the parking calculations.
But on the nomenclature over here, it says 24.
If you look at the parking calculations,
Yeah.
the very bottom, it says total spaces required, 21. Total provided in phase 1, it says 16, but it should say 17. And then phase 2, there's an additional 8. So with just phase 1, they're 3 short. When you add in phase 2, they have 3 extra.
17.
Oh, yeah, 4, yes, 4, thank you. My poor mouth. So you're granting a waiver for 4 spaces, and they're 4 short with phase 1. But with phase 2, it seems like they're adding, a lot with 8 spaces, but it makes up that 4, and then they end up having more than the minimum required spaces. So a total of 17 would be provided in phase 1.
Just to follow, is there anything in there that sets that demand based on what you perceive to be the use? I mean, it's been a real estate office, as was explained by one of the applicants. Typically, not everybody's there at one time, so, I mean, is that taken into consideration in terms of that waiver request by the other?
Well, that's something the board needs to take into consideration. The
Yeah.
parking calculations are based on 1 spot per 200 square feet of office
Okay,
and 1
that's
per
my question. Okay.
600 square feet of storage.
The other thing to remember is that right now we're showing by the approved site plan spaces in here. And you can't get 2 cars in there right now because it's too tight. So that's why we want to move it back and widen it so that you can get cars in there, because showing a spot on a plan doesn't necessarily mean it's a spot that you can use unless you have 2 very small vehicles.
Now, I think what's being proposed is definitely an improvement over the walkthrough, I mean, in terms of what the current configuration is. Okay, thank you.
Angela, do you have something to add?
No, I think Carl covered everything. He's been very busy adding and adjusting the plans. So, and I think he went through all the points of the staff report. So I really don't have anything new to add unless anybody has any questions.
Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Tui?
would there be objection to signage in regards to the parking behind?
Yes.
On our site walk, There was some comments and some concern a little bit about on the parking that's right on Cataldo Road,
Right,
going into the ledge a bit there,
right.
because they're gonna make them deeper, and what kind of landscaping or something is gonna be done there to make sure that
It's really no different. There's going to be one small pine tree that has to be taken out as a result of the expansion, and the rest is just essentially a slight regrading of that banking, but all that vegetation is planning to stay.
stay? Okay, all right. Maybe I wasn't with everybody on that conversation. Okay, thanks.
On the face of it, it looks a little odd to approve this with the parking seeming to come in secondary. Although I suppose we could approve it because we are asking, the approval will be based on a waiver of parking. And then the addition, which is near a wetland and, has some, looks like it has resolved some drainage issues and all. But, there's potential for it perhaps not going through. So if we're comfortable with the parking that's being proposed absent Phase 2, I don't see that that's an issue. We seem to have addressed a lot of the stormwater issue that I've noticed. Phase 2 would obviously rectify, assuming it gets approved, would rectify any parking problems. In fact, you might then have an opportunity to think about changing stall sizes or something at some point. I don't know whether we really need to get into that, because the back is employee parking, and I do tend to agree, certainly for employee parking, you don't need the 10 feet. I do like it for, have some of it available for visitors. Does anybody else have any concerns with this, or issues with what we have here?
Mr. Chairman, just another couple of comments. I do appreciate having the wetlands designated, because certainly when you walked on the site, it became pretty obvious that that needed to be done. But on the treatment swale on the right-hand side, if you will, of the building, so that would be the westerly side of Route 3, it is pretty obvious that a lot of that water is coming down through and ends up behind my house on Westview Drive and ultimately down into to Waukee that area. But I do think that my concern was, when I walked it, was the runoff, how that would be complicated, the topography of the level of the elevation of the building versus that back parking lot. But I think the treatment swale concept, I think that I like the way that, it's the first time I've seen it tonight, but it certainly addresses some of the personal concerns that I had as a member of trying to treat that water as it goes into that wetlands and then down through and hopefully dissipate it. So I think that's a plus. But my question is, would there be any point at all to being a little more aggressive in terms of the handling of that brook that flows down parallel with Route 3, stone line, something like that, just so that if we had a little bit heavier runoff, we seem to be getting more of those, what I call flash storms. Would it be better to try to really divert that water along that swale, that natural swale that's there, and to find that a little more, line it maybe, versus, just let it happen?
Right, we actually, we meaning me, have contacted Randy Shuey, he's a soil scientist, wetland scientist, certified erosion and sediment control specialist, to take a look at that before we go to the zoning board, to make sure that we do what we can to that drainage area. We have to be a little bit careful with how we treat that, because it actually, playing around with that existing drainage may be a state wetlands permit. We don't like to tread all that much down the state wetlands permit area, so we'll have Randy take a look at that. The other thing I will add that doesn't show up on this plan is, from the beginning of the wetlands that go off this site down to the culvert that goes under Route 104 is about 200 feet of treatment, natural wetland treatment that goes down through there. So a little bit of sediment, which might come of a flash storm coming from the culvert, going about 60 feet or so down that ditch, gets very well treated by the time it reaches that culvert. I would imagine it could be possibly any sediment that could go that far. Because it's a fairly small culvert, and although the ditch does have some washout to it, it's a pretty narrow ditch.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
kind of,
we'd be happy to look at that.
yeah, it does get kind of odd at the end. I mean, it's sort of,
Well, there were more wetlands flags hung than I would have anticipated that there would be, but which wasn't the first time I was surprised. And I will take responsibility for flagging the parking lot corners with the same color flagging as the wetlands flag, which evidently was a little confusing, but I do have a pretty good verified medical excuse, and that is that I am colorblind.
Thank you.
okay, I think one thing certainly is to add some notation to the plan about the potential for a second handicap parking space there if needed. I think it could just be listed as if needed, and maybe doesn't necessarily have to be an employee one because, as Ann pointed out, none of us are getting any younger. So, is there? So,
The other thing, Mr. Chairman, that I'd just like to mention, if the board were to entertain a conditional approval, if we could get the plan signed before next month, because I can make these note changes that are in the staff review fairly quickly, because we'd like to be able to pull a building permit for the structure, for the additional structure.
Would they be able to do all that with the other stuff pending?
Just for phase one.
Yes, because a special exception is only required for phase 2, and depending on where Carl gets with the parking in the front setback, then we would be all set to sign phase 1 as soon as
So you
Carl
would
makes a
have
few
that
adjustments.
resolved in the front portion.
Yeah. I did want to mention, though, on the site walk, we did have a look at where approximately the abutter's property line is. I don't see her in the audience this evening, but I figured we might as well get it into the record that, because she did not have the benefit of being on the site walk with us for one reason or another. So we did observe approximately where the boundary line is between the two lots, the residential property and Remax, and noted that pretty much all of the vegetation that she values is on the Remax site. And so I think that the relocating of the parking area is still substantially far enough away to retain a large buffer between the two uses. There was, I don't know if it's the 1975 plan that Carl has up there or what, but that was a condition thrown in there, and it's probably a condition that's thrown in there because in the site plan regulations it says if you have a commercial use or a commercial zone abutting a residential property, to have a vegetative buffer between the two. And so that's probably why that was thrown in there in the beginning, and I think definitely there's a substantial vegetative buffer that is there and will be left. Yeah. So I threw that in there just to re-emphasize the point and her concern that was brought up in the letter and at the meeting last time.
The wooded area shown on the approved site plan is 10 feet wide. And we're more than twice that with the expansion.
Yeah, one other thing I do want to note, because I think it has been somewhat of an issue, that on the, and I don't see this as a big issue here, but I do want to sort of point it out. When we talk about cutoff fixtures, I want to make sure that the light does tend to go down, doesn't just have like a mirror bounce it back up. Somebody would say they bounce them necessarily back up, but they don't achieve sort of the dark sky look so much that
Right.
is one of the benefits of a cutoff fixture.
And also, one of the things to remember is that this site it's not open late anyways. So not all of the lights are left on all of the time. Yeah. Unlike across the street.
Mr. Chairman, did I hear that you thought that we should have an additional handicap space? There is one on the plan currently.
I suggested that we have an additional space be noted that for the potential of an additional handicap in case it be needed.
Okay.
I mean, if the board feels that we should have two, that's fine with me. I just said that at a minimum, I would like to be noted on the plan that we did consider, that there was available space for a second one.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, if that was in reality, that would be right about where the addition and the existing office, is it that space right there, or, well, it's not designated, but would that be where it would be going?
Closest to the front door?
Yeah, right here.
No, it would just be modification.
Of this one?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Because
Usually two handicap parking spots share like the middle stripe zone.
Right, the stripe zone does not create interference with the parking coming out because it's a dead zone.
Yeah, I guess what you're saying is one option might be put next to each other. That way you only have to have three, what would you call them, door zones or whatever, rather than four. That's, yeah. Perhaps, and, it's up to the board if we want to just say that it should be in the front, whatever. So in the future, it's decided it would be better to have them next to each other or both ends. Or if you want to have two, that's fine. Do I have, is everybody set here for a motion? Or no? Oh, I'm sorry. It has been a little while since I've been here.
Point of clarification, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
The handouts tonight are missing a page. If you ran off the email today, you have all the pages. So I'm coming into the page. What's missing?
It's missing page 2.
I have a page too.
Well, the page 2.
Second page.
It talks about
Okay, there's an additional page two.
the last paragraph is parking. Before that is access. Before that is utilities. So if you see stormwater, then you're missing a page before that.
But there's no parking for utilities.
Oh, great. Yep,
Yeah,
those read
So I think that, did you make extra copies of it?
Five standards.
Well, anyway, some of us have copies of that.
Perhaps that would be the person who would be
Well,
best able to make the motion.
It has been reviewed by Carl, and it has also been reviewed by Angela. Agreed
You
that
guys got the full thing.
I read it online.
these packets are missing it, but I would think we've heard enough about utilities, and we've heard enough about the green space, and we've heard enough about parking, and we've heard enough about wetlands. That's what's on that page.
Let me open it to the public and see if there's any comments from the public. Anyone from the public wish to make a comment?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I ran into the abutter in the post office after your sidewalk, and she wanted me to tell the planning board that she was there all day waiting and nobody came, and the coffee got cold. And she planned on going to the sidewalk, and when I asked Angela about it, she said that you guys were up there for an hour in front of her house.
So, Did she miss, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. She missed us, or?
Mary Lee said that Pillsbury? Mrs. Pillsbury missed us, I guess. She
Oh,
didn't
okay.
see us on the sidewalk.
Oh.
She wasn't upset, she was.
Yeah, maybe it means the buffer's working.
We were standing in the driveway.
Okay, but, yeah, I was not on that sidewalk. I did, it's a small lot, so I went, looked at it a few days ago. Just walked around some. But, is there any other comments from the public? Okay. Hearing none, I'll close the public portion of the hearing and bring it back to the board for either further discussion or a motion.
Is this one?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion regarding the application from Bayside Realty LLC, tax map S23, lot 92, located at 208 Annie Webster Highway, in the Walker-One watershed in the Central Business District. The conditional approval would be granted subject to the fact that a special exception may be required for parking in the setback, specifically 5 feet from the property line, if so required. The special exception shall be cross-referenced, if so required, the special exception shall be cross-referenced on the final plan for Phase 1. A special exception is also required for the parking area in the 50-foot wetland setback. The special exception shall be noted on the final plan prior to final approval of Phase 2. The edge of the wetland shall be marked in the field prior to construction or prior to constructing the second phase of the lower parking area to ensure construction activities remain outside the wetland. Permits from the Water and Sewer Department are required for the expansion of use prior to obtaining a building permit. It is recommended as well that the green space on the west of the building addition remain clear as to maintain a sight distance between vehicles entering the driveway from both parking lots. A pre-construction conference is required prior to commencing Phase 2 of the project to review limits of construction in wetland areas. There are 21 parking spaces required and 17 spaces proposed in Phase 1, which requires a parking waiver from the site parking plan requirements of 4 spaces. The parking waiver shall be noted on the final plan for Phase 1. A sign indicating that the rear parking proposed for Phase 2 will be displayed at the entrance of that parking road, indicating that that parking is for employees only. A dimensional parking waiver is required for not meeting the minimum standard in the site plan parking requirements. This is already there. Okay. An allowance will be made for 1 additional handicap parking space if found to be necessary. Temporary erosion control shall be added to the final plan downslope of the disturbed areas while being mindful of the location of the property line and wetland boundary. The assistance of the surveyor to stake the exact location of the property line and parking is required to ensure all improvements occur on the site. A note shall be added to the plan indicating that all light fixtures shall be cut off and directed downward. The dumpster location and proposed method of screening shall be added to the final plan. The propane tank shall be relocated to an acceptable location by the fire chief with his approval. The size of the tank shall be noted on the plan, and if it is above or below ground. A note shall be added to the plan stating the vegetation between the shared lot line and the new parking area shall be retained to the greatest extent possible. The planning board reserves the right to review and amend any approval as provided for in site plan review regulations numbers 6 and 17.
Mr. Tui, I'm not sure whether I caught that. Did you want a note regarding the handicap space to be put on the plan, or?
You were suggesting that, Mr. Chairman, and I had stated that let me get that wording, that allowance be made for one additional handicap space if it's found to be necessary.
Okay, I guess what I'm changing my tune slightly then and saying that I think that would also be helpful if we made it a note on the plan. Just rather than just say it on a blank allowance.
Okay, very good, that a note be made on the plan indicating allowance for one additional handicap space if found to be necessary.
Thank you very much.
I second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mary Lee, will you poll the board?
Mr. Brothers?
Yes.
Mrs. Lapham?
Yes.
Mr. Savell?
Yes.
Mrs. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Durkin says.
Mr. Durkin.
Mr. Durkin says yes.
Mr. Tui says yes.
And Ms. Byer?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman?
With architectural review, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman?
I'll make the motion.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, another additional matter in regard to the Bayside Realty. I would like to make a motion that the proposed design architecturally demonstrates substantial conformity to the general and specific criteria set forth in the ordinance.
There is details in your packet. Does anyone have any questions regarding that in reference to the architectural design review?
Mr. Chairman, I second that motion.
I'd like to open it up to the public just on the off chance they might want to comment on that. Seeing as I kind of missed it to begin with, so I'll overcompensate for it right now. Is anyone from the public here to comment on the architectural design review? I'm not hearing any, so I'll close the public portion and go back to, we have a motion on the table, and seeing as it's just architectural design review, it's a little less formal, so I think I got a second also.
Okay.
A motion and a second. Any questions regarding this? I'm not sure we have to poll the board, but why don't we? Mary Lee, would you like to try again?
Okay. Mr. Brothers?
Yes.
Mrs. Lapham? Yes. Mr. Savell?
Yes.
Mrs. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Durkin says yes.
Yes.
And Ms. Byer?
Yes.
night.